Here's one special cover tape game I neglected to mention back in the Cover Tape Wars video. Advanced Lawnmower Simulator, a game that appeared on a Your Sinclair tape in 1988. You play as an unnamed YTS junior gardener and you are tasked with mowing a lawn. You only have the shittiest possible lawnmower at your disposal. You press a button, mow the lawn, and after you're done you're either rewarded with a sandwich or the standard of your work is thoroughly mocked. It's completely random. This carries on, without variation, day after day, until, also randomly, you are killed. It doesn't even say how, although we can presume that the blade from the rickety mower the YTS gardener was using sheared off on a rock, flew up and severed his carotid artery. At least that's what the red screen says to me. YS presented the game as real and praised it to high heaven, although it was of course a hoax, essentially a piss take of a certain type of game that a certain software studio was doing. It's also the subject of the earliest video on this channel, something I made over 8 years ago. Damn. Anyway, I have no real idea why Codemasters added the simulator suffix to so many of their games, to the point where it became something to be taken the piss out of. Maybe it sounded more legitimate for a budget title? I really don't know, and it's something I intend to look up when we do get to that inevitable Codemasters video, because obviously that will come eventually. For now, well, for historical amusement, I intend to look at them. All of them. A whistle-stop tour, if you will. By my count, there are 26 different Codemasters games with the simulator suffix at least, and I do hope you're ready to see all of them. Oh, what, you don't think I'm serious? You're saying I'm not up to it? Well, see for yourself. Anyway, it's only fair to do this alphabetically, and because they are the versions that I know, these are going to be the Spectrum versions of the game. If we added C64 and Amstrad to this video, then we'd probably be here for about 3 hours. Anyway, here goes nothing. Cruelly, we start with a package that's apparently 4 games in one. 4 soccer simulators. What a deal, huh? I mean, 4 games for £9. Wow! In this package you get 11-a-side soccer, indoor soccer, street soccer, and soccer skills. 11-a-side soccer is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a rather bad football simulator with awful jerky scrolling and players that are a royal pain to control. Indoor soccer is the exact same game, only with less players, a smaller pitch, and the ball rebounds off the walls. Street soccer is the exact same game, only with some cars and things dotted around for the ball to bounce off of. Soccer Skills isn't the exact same game, and instead is a collection of exciting games such as Dribble Around the Cones, Penalties, and Lift a Weight a few times. Suddenly that £9 doesn't feel like so much of a bargain now, does it? Sadly, this is not a good start, a very lacklustre package indeed. Word on the box is that it's absolutely brilliant, mind you. More on that later.
Advanced Pinball Simulator.
Advanced Pinball Simulator is the first game we're seeing in this video by Philip and Andrew Oliver, who are of course the legendary Oliver twins. They're mostly famous for Dizzy of course, but they did loads more than that. In fact, while with Codies, it was once estimated that the Oliver twins were responsible for 7% of all computer game sales within the United Kingdom. These guys were serious, in other words. They were Codemasters aces, and Advanced Pinball Simulator is just one highly fun game by them. Now, it is a pinball game on the Spectrum, so don't go expecting highly realistic physics and don't go trying to kill the ball, but there's enough features on the table to keep you coming back. A lot of the music for Codies games was done by the almighty David Whittaker too, another big plus point, and this one's got a particularly good song. This is a specky favourite of mine from right back in the day, and happily it's still held up well enough. Now, Codie sims aren't all sports, there's a bunch of action too. Like this one, Arcade Flight Simulator. This is a somewhat different take on your regular shoot 'em up. It's more about dogfighting, you can control your height, and you can twirl around to try and shoot enemies out of the sky. A little like Time Pilot in a way. The controls are a bit tricky at first, but once they're locked in, it's actually a half-decent little game. I generally like shooters, and I do like it when a game tries something a bit different with them. It's more memorable than a regular vertical scrolling shooter would have been at any rate. One thing I certainly don't want to do is give the impression that all these simulator games are bad, because far from it. Indeed, here's one of the best, ATV Simulator. It's quad biking and it's fantastic. You have to get the quad bike through 5 different courses, making your way over obstacles and trying not to fall off, although naturally you will, a lot. It's a simple and fun game, like an early version of Trials really. Scratches the same itch that the almighty Kickstart 2 does. The sheer absurdity of being knocked off your bike by a bunch of bloody seals playing keepy-uppy also adds to the charm. Honestly, this is a very memorable specky game for me and a definite hidden gem. I love it. BMX Freestyle Simulator then. This one isn't all that hot. It is a side-on game, like ATV, focused on performing various tricks, wheeling for a certain distance, ramp jumps and so on. Could be good, but there's some real problems. All the controls are bunched up on the left side and the game is stupidly unforgiving in that you screw up once and that's it. Game over. Being a multi-event game, you're almost bound to fail an event the first time you try it, but you barely get a shot at even practicing it. If there'd just been some sort of practice mode, this'd be fine. Alas, I find it to be very annoying in a completely unnecessary way. We're sticking with bikes. One of the most famous Codies simulators, the BMX one. You'll find a lot of the Codies sims look like this. They're top down and the tracks are all on a single screen, much like Super Sprint basically. Some would say it's a rip-off, but I like these games generally, mainly because the twins did them and they've got a knack for making the games look somewhat good. All the little slopes you have to navigate give it a bit of care that you didn't always find in such things. It's fun to mess around with, if not to beat your opponent then to at least qualify for the next track. And it's a successful game too. Very popular simulator, this one. You can also play it on the NES too. It's one of the games on the Quattro Sports unlicensed cartridge. Naturally, BMX Simulator would get a sequel, one with beefed up graphics and more focus on dirt bike racing, meaning that there's a bunch more obstacles on the track. It's an okay enough sequel I suppose, but I do find all the new obstacles to be a little annoying. Honestly, I prefer the simplicity of the original game over this one. There's 2 versions of this, a regular one and a professional version that allows you to do a bit more tweaking on your bike and is generally a lot harder but features the same tracks. We're sticking with the Oliver twins with Championship Jet Ski Simulator. And gee, it's our 3rd top-down racing game in a row. This is another good one though. There's a couple of things to get used to, like the tiny little jet skis and the sensitive thrust-esque controls, but once you do, this is really fun. You do go at a blistering pace on those courses. And there's some nice things like the crackly Codies voice sample that you'd always get in these games. There's an option to view a replay, and you also get 2 choices on the tape. The first side features some nice easygoing tracks, and once you've mastered them, there's a bunch of very hard tracks on side 2. On the whole, I do like this one. The couple of quid goes a long way with it. This is also known as Jet Bike Simulator, a game that's virtually identical to this one, which means we can just cross another one off the list there. One more less to do. Okay, here's a non-sport offering. Fruit Machine Simulator. I've played this way too much over the years. It's a fruit machine, only without losing any actual money. The big thing here is the cash bash. Time your presses right, and you could win as much as £5! Woohoo! I love it. You'd think that without such things as, gambling law to consider, you could be really fancy with the prizes. What about £1 million? 10 grand? How about a monkey even? Nah, a fiver's the jackpot. We can't be unrealistic about these things. It is a simulation after all. A sim of a plain old fruit machine that people play in a pub, chucking 10p's in, hoping that they'll make enough money to buy another pint. Mind you, it is a good one. Sadly, however, an overpriced guide on Breaking the Bandits, Mastering the Art of the Nudges and Holds, that's advertised for sale in your favourite 90s porn mag, isn't included. I think I've just about exhausted my fruit machine simulator material here, to be honest. Which is a shame because there's a sequel. This one features the Mega Trek, and a whole bunch of other features. There's a few more mini-games in this one than there was in the first game. I remember this one well too. Again, I've played it so much, and as a result, I'm quite fond of it. I think these games are real good fun for about 15 minutes or so. Still, it is a fruit machine game and there's not much to say that I didn't say for the first one. Instead, let's talk about the inlay. Codemasters inlays are kind of interesting as they're almost presented like sections from a very enthusiastic review with things like the ultimate fruit machine simulator, just like the real thing, unbelievable gameplay, and their actual slogan, believe it or not, absolutely brilliant! Now they're not proper faked quotes or anything as there's no attribution to them, but they kind of seem like it if you're not reading properly. Indeed, going back to the first game we looked at, 4 Soccer Simulators, well that's right in the place where an actual review quote would be, innit? Some of the mags, particularly YS, weren't pleased about this sort of thing and frequently called Codies out on it. But that often was accompanied with an actual decent review, as Codies games were of quite a high standard for budget titles at the time, mostly. It's one of the little things that Codies used to do frequently that wasn't exactly smiled upon. I do love the front cover of this game though. So UK, so Only Fools and Horses, a classic slice of pubby 80s memorabilia. There's no Las Vegas pretences here, the fruit machine simulators are realistic, and I adore them for it. Grand Prix Simulator, also known as Grand PRIX if you've ever watched any of Auntie's Bloomers.
Talking about the South African Grand PRIX.
Funnily enough, we've already seen the BMX and jet ski games that spun off from this one, the first of the Oliver Twins top-down racing games. So yeah, you kinda know the score for this one. The game's fast, the controls are slippy, and it'll keep you entertained for a bit. Personally, it's my least favourite of the three, but that's mainly down to the graphics being a little bit simpler. Anyway, here's some fun. As mentioned, these games are kind of like Super Sprint, particularly this one because we're in a car after all. Activision, who did publish games for the Specky under their Electric Dreams label, did take notice and sued Codies for it, alleging breach of copyright. It doesn't end there though. A couple of years later, Codemasters sued fellow budget label Alternative over their game Formula Grand Prix similarities to Grand Prix Simulator. This is said game, which is better known as Formula 1 and is actually a couple of years older than Codies' game, and it plays nothing like Grand Prix Simulator. Now that's all true, but this wasn't about the game, it was about the similarity of the cover art for Alternative's re-release of it. Judge for yourself. I think Codies might actually have had a case after all. Such is the often unseemly world of budget game production. Such a successful game is naturally going to get itself another sequel. The gameplay in Grand Prix Simulator 2 is pretty similar of course, but it's a better game, with the same sort of handling and much better graphics. Not as famous, but I would play this over the original. It should be noted that with some retooling, Grand Prix Simulator would become one of Codies' most successful 90s franchises, the Micro Machines games. Alas, the Oliver Twins would not benefit from the success of those games, but that's a story for another video. This one fills me with a nameless dread. We've mostly seen racing or pub games so far, and 4 Soccer Sims, well, it wasn't exactly a winner. How will the Sims fare with another big sport like rugby, one that isn't often seen in games, on the spectrum no less? Well, the results are, I don't know, kind of interesting. International Rugby Simulator is nowhere near as bad as I thought it would be. It looks like rugby to me in that there's a whole lot of bashing into people, and it actually does try to hold up to the simulator end of the bargain as much as it can. It's kind of hard, but I can see who I'm controlling in the mess, and there's a lot of players on screen at a time without the game really losing all that much speed. I mean, it's not fast at all to begin with, but it's not, you know, tortoise on a planet mud slow sort of thing. And that's a big plus point on the Specky. Is it good? Well, it's not bad. I'd still stick with the almighty International Rugby on the Mega Drive though. Motocross Simulator is again kind of like ATV. Side on, manoeuvre over the obstacles and so on. Actually, it's close to BMX freestyle scene as those were the guys who did it. However, this is not good at all. I just don't get it in fact. Half the controls don't do anything, the keyboard controls bunch your hands up in ridiculous fashion so you get cramp in your left hand, and try as I might, I can't even get past the first bloody log. This is just a wholly infuriating experience that's honestly amongst the worst Codies Sims we've seen so far. Mountain Bike Simulator, a late release for Codies, is a better game of the same sort, in that it doesn't just kill you immediately. The wheelies and jumps actually do seem to work out here. Considering that this came out as late as 1991, this must be one of the last Codies budget titles. It was around this time that the company were gradually turning more towards full-price games. It's not bad for such a late title, but something about it still seems to be lacking. Maybe it's due to familiarity, but I can't see this in the same league as the almighty Kickstart 2, or indeed Codemasters' own ATV, or Scramble Simulator. They're just better games in the end. Now, I hope you're ready for a bunch of games that aren't just simulators, they're also professional. You know, just to really hammer it home. First up is another game from those Oliver characters, Professional Ski Simulator. This is one of the best regarded Codies sim games, and it's easy to see why, as it's quality. It's a difficult game requiring you to seriously hammer the C key and get thrusting in order to get going, but it's quite intuitive when it comes to knowing when you should and shouldn't. Plus, I don't know, it just looks great. Something about the really good detail on the courses and the colours just make it feel so right, so suitably wintry, a perfect game for this time of year. These may be budget titles and some of them may be questionable, but the Oliver twins, well, they just don't miss. This is probably the best game we'll see of theirs in the video, and it's actually a doozy. Right up there with ATV. And now we have some snooker, Professional Snooker Simulator no less. It's classic primitive top-down snooker and it tries to be realistic enough. The table's big, the pockets are small, there's options for fine aiming and even a little picture that tells you where you're going to hit the object ball. All of this isn't bad, but being a simple top-down game, yeah, it's tough. Most shots just fly everywhere, making for, well, judging by my own skill levels, a very accurate game of snooker indeed. Sadly, it's 2-player only, so you're gonna need a friend who's willing to play a nearly 30-year-old snooker game with you for a good couple of hours. Good luck with that. You and said friend would be much better off playing the earlier but easier and honestly much better Steve Davis snooker. That's top of the class on the spectrum. Of course, the sensible option would be to forget about all of this and just go straight to Jimmy White. But I'm not sensible, which is why this video exists at all. Okay, sometimes the Codemasters budget simulator range could get quite shady, and this game, Pro Boxing Simulator, is the prime example of that. Now, buying up a game and localising it is one thing, of course, but this is different. Pro Boxing Simulator is a 1990 re-release of a quite successful game called By Fair Means or Foul that was already released over here by Superior Software in 1989, so only a year beforehand. This wasn't exactly explained fully, or indeed at all, by Codies, and anyone who bought this, having already bought the earlier game, which was a full-price title by the way, was understandably very annoyed. Codemasters' explanation? Well, it was a new release. For them. They hadn't released By Fair Means or Foul, had they? So, yeah, that's pretty shit. For things like this, as well as their general presentation that we've discussed already, Codemasters weren't usually the most popular company, particularly amongst the Spectrum magazines, because shit like this would just give them a coronary. Anyway, Pro Boxing Simulator is a pretty decent title on the whole, although it's much better on other systems. It's a boxing game where, as the title suggests, you can foul a lot. Kicks, knees to the groin, headbutts and all that. Trouble is you have to try and do them when the ref isn't looking, which thankfully is often. I find fighting games generally quite tough with the specky keyboard, so I'm useless at this. But, it isn't bad. Of course, it's not that professional and certainly not much of a simulation of boxing, which is perhaps another problem people had with it. Unless they were talking about the proper unlicensed stuff, of course. So after channeling your inner Lenny McLean, you might want to relax on the golf course a little. As ever, Codemasters have you covered with Pro Golf Simulator. Pick your club, try and get the yardage right, and then blast it over to the green. Hopefully. If you've played most any top-down golf game, then you've played this. The music's alright at least, but it won't be too long before you're bored. The courses themselves are kind of annoying too. Alas, games like this one just haven't held up in the same way that a leaderboard or an original PGA Tour golf has. Simple as that, really. We'll get through every vehicle out there soon enough. Next up, powerboats. I was half expecting another top-down racer with Pro Powerboat Simulator, but nope. This is an action game where you have to guide the powerboat to the end of the stage and avoid getting blown up. If something happens to be behind you, then you can blow them up with mines. Most things are in front of you though, so more often than not they're useless. This game is pretty mediocre really. Dead in the middle of the pack. It's a good job I have footage here, because otherwise I'm not sure just how much I'd be able to tell you about it. Professional Skateboard Simulator. This one's a little different. Well, it's sort of like Ski Simulator actually, but not as good. It's also a bit like 720 Degrees, only without the free roaming side of things. You alternate between two courses, one where you collect flags and another where you go between them, one that's isometric and another that's top down. The controls are suitably tetchy, seeing as we are on wheels after all, and it can be annoying on occasion, but the music's quite nice, and it does make you want to come back for another go at it in all fairness. On the whole, not a bad game. I don't mind it all that much. Weirdly, it's the only game I've played in this whole lot that comes with some rudimentary copy protection, and I do mean rudimentary because seriously it would take like 30 seconds to copy down this code sheet. It's rubbish. Finally, the professional saga ends with tennis, and oh dear. This game is horrible. The complete lack of music and sound is quite disappointing for 1990, but more than that, everything about this game stinks, particularly the computer. It's the most predictable tennis game I've ever played. After a game or two, you simply know exactly where the CPU's going to hit the ball, because it never deviates. Worse than that, seriously, the computer never returns the serve from the ad side. I've flung hundreds of serves at him, and not once has he returned it. Mind you, the controls and perspective are messed up enough that the CPU will happily keep pace with you regardless. The result is a long and utterly painful slog. There are good tennis games on the Specky, believe it or not. This is decidedly not one of them. Bored of fruit machines? Why not have a go on the quiz machine instead with Pub Trivia Simulator? Get enough questions right and you could enter the money maze. Literally pounds worth of prizes are up for grabs. Pick one of 5 avatars with amusing Viz-style eyes. Lose all your money, throw a glass at the machine and offer it out for a fight as the bouncers come at you. That last part is optional, of course. Pub Trivia Simulator will not only test your general knowledge, but also your knowledge of current affairs. Of course, that is current affairs circa 1989, so you're going to need to be up on your spandex-based knowledge in order to get anywhere here. This game was a favourite of my dad's, so it's certainly got a nostalgic hit for me. I like it. It's obviously outdated, but faintly amusing. More top-down racing. Rallycross Simulator isn't on a single screen at least. There's some okay presentation too, decent music. Unfortunately, the game itself is balked. Usually in games like this you have a button for acceleration and it works out just fine. That was the case with Grand Prix Simulator and all that. Here you just have the directions. So when you press up, not only do you turn into the up direction, you accelerate up too. It's confusing and awful, a royal pain on a keyboard. It's a shame. If the controls had just been normal, it would have probably been okay, but it's just quite unplayable. Okay, SAS Combat Simulator, which is really stretching it now. There's now a simulator about this. It's a top-down shooter where you gun down a whole load of dudes, a la Commando or Ikari Warriors. You can command a jeep as well, bringing the game even closer to Ikari. There are some irritations here. I find the hit detection to be way off, it's a bit frustrating to control and it takes way too long to throw a freaking grenade. I also don't like the side-scrolling bit where you're inexplicably armed with naught but a knife. And no, this isn't in the same league as Green Beret either. On the whole, I did not like this one, and it's second to last on the list. Hopefully we'll end on a high. And so, finally, from the people who brought you SAS Combat Simulator, we have Super Tank Simulator. Yay! It's a similar sort of deal, but a lot more methodical. You have to be slow with the tank and pick at your enemies. There's no auto-scrolling, so you get enough time to do that at least. I think this is better than the SAS game, but it's quite hard and annoyingly unfair. Much like that game, I find the hit detection to be super off in it. Some of these simulator games could be seen as lesser versions of bigger titles. In this instance, Super Tank is basically a budget version of Hewson's Marauder. It could have served that purpose back then, but like a lot of these games, it's just lost its purpose now when the playing field between them all has been levelled. So, there you go. all the Codemasters simulator games, on the Spectrum at least. It makes for an interesting slice of late 80s, early 90s computer trinkets. And they're certainly not all bad. Of the 26 games that got a showcase here, I would say that on the whole I thoroughly enjoyed half of them. Indeed, the best of these games, ATV, Professional Ski, Championship Jet Ski, are stone cold classics to me. And yes, there's certainly a couple of sentimental favourites. Games like this though give you a good idea of what the corner shop games buying experience was like, because that amazes some people. When you were faced with a couple of rows of games and a hurried parent saying, well, go on then, the car's running, it's on double yellow lines, whatever. It's easy to say that those were the days when you could buy classics for £3 and the like, and indeed you could. But that depended on what you chose. Yeah, sometimes you might pick up a re-release of School Days or whatever. Sometimes you might pick up an unplayable piece of crap. And don't forget, time is short. We're not spending 5 minutes poring over these things carefully as you would in a games shop. There's a queue forming behind you and everything. You gotta move. And so Codemasters were usually a good go-to. Not just for the simulators of course, but for many other games, a lot of which were pretty good as well. And so, more often than not, the Codies would win out, and you would get, if not a classic, then something that was quite acceptable and not bad. Not that you were massively critical at that age, usually. Anyway, I could end this with another heralding of some of Codies' better budget gems, but the truth is that I'm off to lose more virtual money on the fruit machine sims. Bye for now! Thanks for watching this video. Maybe you'd like to watch another. And if you really like the stuff, then maybe you could subscribe to the channel, or even support me on Patreon. You could join the list of the great and the good here. Anyway, thank you for watching, and whoever you are, whoever you be, have a good one, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.